When does a band stop merely playing songs and start constructing sonic cathedrals that defy the very laws of commercial gravity, effectively murdering the 3-minute pop format to birth a new religion of texture and time? To understand why metal is not just a collection of tracks but the tectonic shift that allowed the continental plates of rock music to settle into the landscape we recognize today, one must strip away the mythology of Pink Floyd as stadium gods and look at them as 4 desperate architects staring at a blank blueprint in 1971. You have to understand the panic, because art born of comfort is rarely revolutionary. Following the mental disintegration and departure of their original leader, Syd Barrett, the remaining members, Roger Waters, David Gilmour, Richard Wright, and Nick Mason, had spent the intervening years flailing in the dark, producing psychedelic noodling that often lacked direction or cohesive structural integrity. They were a band without a center, hovering on the precipice of irrelevance, dangerously close to becoming a footnote in the history of London's underground scene. MEDDLE is the sound of that center being found, not through luck, but through a rigorous, almost academic dismantling of what a rock band is permitted to do in a recording studio. It is a masterclass in dynamics, a manifesto on the utilization of silence, and the precise moment where the studio mixing desk became an instrument as vital as the Fender Stratocaster or the Hammond organ. The genius of metal lies in its violent rejection of the verse-chorus-verse tyranny that shackles most modern music to the ground. If you are looking for immediate gratification or the cheap dopamine hit of a radio hook, you are in the wrong place. This album demands, that you possess an attention span longer than that of a goldfish and an ear attuned to the subtleties of frequency manipulation. It is an exercise in tension and release, utilizing the full frequency spectrum to manipulate the listener's physiological response in a way that few albums before or since have managed. We begin this dissection with One of These Days, an opener that functions less like a song and more like a declaration of war against silence. A lesser band would have started with a guitar riff to announce their presence. Pink Floyd starts with wind. This is not merely a sound effect, it is the establishment of a noise floor, a distinct acoustic space that places the listener in a void. When the instrumentation finally enters, it is not a melodic invitation, but a rhythmic assault. We are hearing 2 bass guitars playing simultaneously, a technique that creates a density in the low-end frequencies that is physically palpable. Critically, this is not just Roger Waters. It is a dual bass attack. Roger Waters and David Gilmour are both playing bass on this track, one panned hard left and the other hard right in the stereo field. They utilized a Binson Echo Rec 2, a magnetic drum delay unit that is notoriously temperamental and requires constant maintenance, to create a galloping, delay-drenched ostinato on a single note. B. The technical brilliance here lies in the delay time, which is set to a dotted 8th note against the quarter note pulse, creating a syncopated rhythmic displacement that makes the bass line sound twice as fast as it is actually being played. This is a trick of the ear, a psychoacoustic manipulation that drives the track forward with the relentlessness of a piston. It turns the bass guitar, usually a grounding instrument, into a percussive lead instrument. As the track evolves, the listener is denied the comfort of a human voice wailing about love or heartbreak. Instead, we get a synthesizer, specifically the VCS-3, a portable analog synthesizer that was notoriously difficult to keep in tune, imitating the whistling of a projectile weapon. The guitar work here is not about virtuosity in the traditional blues rock sense. It is about timbre and aggression. Gilmour attacks the strings with a steel slide, utilizing high gain and heavy compression to create a sound that mimics a tearing sheet of metal. This is the difference between playing a guitar and weaponizing it. The breakdown in the middle, famously featuring the slowed-down, tremolo-laden voice of drummer Nick Mason, threatening to cut you into little pieces, is the only vocal presence on the track. It was processed through a ring modulator to strip it of its humanity. It is threatening, absurd, and heavy. It strips away the pretense of politeness that characterized much of the pop music of the era. This is instrumental rock music discovering its teeth, realizing that it does not need a frontman to be compelling. The transition from this industrial aggression to A Pillow of Winds is where the band displays a sophistication that was largely absent in their earlier, more chaotic work. We drop from the aggressive driving B minor of the opener into a gentle acoustic E major context, though the harmonic movement is far more complex than simple campfire chords, drifting into the Lydian mode to create that suspended, dreamlike quality. This track is a study in modal interchange and texture. Gilmour's slide guitar here returns, but the context is entirely flipped. He uses volume swells and a clean tone to emulate the sound of a pedal steel, creating a glissando effect that floats above the mix like a vapor. The acoustic guitars are tracked with a shimmering, close-mic'd intimacy, likely utilizing small diaphragm condenser microphones to capture the transient attack of the pick against the strings, while rolling off the booming low end to leave room for the bass. And the bass itself is crucial here. It is a fretless bass. This allows for microtonal slides and a mois sound that mimics the fluidity of the wind itself, functioning almost as a counter-melody rather than a root note anchor. This track proves that heaviness is not about volume. It is about contrast. You cannot appreciate the storm without the calm, and MEDDLE masters this dynamic range better than perhaps any other album of the era. It forces the listener to lean in, to strain their ears against the quiet, only to be overwhelmed when the volume returns. Then we arrive at Fearless, a track that serves as a textbook definition of a groove that sits behind the beat. If you want to understand the difference between playing in time and playing with feel, this is the recording to study. The guitar tuning is essential here. Open G, 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 D, G, B, D, which allows for that rich, resonant, droning quality where the open strings ring out against the fretted notes. The ascending riff is an exercise in slow building tension, climbing the fretboard while the rhythm section stays stubbornly laid back. It is a lazy, confident strut that refuses to be rushed. But the true stroke of avant-garde genius in Fearless is the integration of the field recording. Superimposing the Rodgers and Hammerstein anthem, "You'll Never Walk Alone," chanted by the Liverpool FC Cop Choir, over the fading coda of the song creates a sonic collage that is deeply emotional and unexpectedly profound. It creates a polyrhythmic effect where the strict time of the band rubs against the organic, swaying, imperfect tempo of the crowd. It creates a sense of space. Suddenly, the listener is not in a hermetically sealed studio, but in a stadium surrounded by humanity. It grounds the ethereal nature of the music in something gritty, sweaty, and real. It bridges the gap between the high art of the studio and the tribalism of the streets. We must address Saint-Tropez and Seamus with the honesty of a musician, not a sycophant. Many critics and casual listeners dismiss these tracks as filler, as throwaway moments that detract from the album's gravity. They are wrong. These tracks are essential palate cleansers. In the architecture of an album, you cannot have constant, suffocating intensity. You need breath. Saint-Tropez adds a necessary element of jazz-inflected pop, showcasing Richard Wright's ability to play major seventh chords and syncopated piano lines that swing with a lightness that contradicts the band's dour image. It reveals the band's versatility and their willingness to not take themselves too seriously. Seamus, the notorious blues track featuring the howling dog belonging to Steve Marriott, is often derided, but look closer at the instrumentation. It is a raw, stripped-back 12-bar blues. It is the band acknowledging their roots, stripping away the studio wizardry to show they can play the bedrock of rock and roll. Is it a joke? Perhaps. But in the context of a heavy, intense album, it serves as a moment of levity, a breath of fresh air before the plunge into the abyss. It is the jester before the king enters the court, and the king is undoubtedly Echoes. Echoes is not a song. It is a symphony in a single movement. It is 23 minutes of structural perfection that defines the entire genre of progressive rock. It is the reason MEDDLE is a masterpiece. It begins with the ping. This single note is not a sonar ping from a submarine, as popular myth suggests. It is a high B played on a Steinway grand piano, fed through a Leslie 122 rotating speaker cabinet, typically used for Hammond organs. The rotation of the speaker horn creates a Doppler effect, giving the note that watery, undulating character. It establishes the theme of the ocean, of depth, of the subconscious. It is a masterclass in minimalism. The resulting ambience is built layer by layer, instrument by instrument. Gilmour's guitar volume swells, utilizing the delay to create cascading waves of sound that wash over the listener. The harmony is deceptively simple, mostly revolving around C minor, but the voicing is spacious, allowing every instrument to occupy its own frequency range without fighting for sonic real estate. When the vocals enter, they are harmonized in a way that blends Gilmour and Wright's voices into a single spectral instrument, a vocal texture that sounds almost non-human. The structural integrity of Echoes is what separates it from the aimless jamming of the late 60s. It follows a distinct narrative arc, almost akin to classical sonata form: exposition, development, recapitulation. After the lyrical verses, we enter the funk section. This is where the rhythm section of Waters and Mason shines. They lock into a groove that is tight, dry, and propulsive. Gilmour's soloing here is sharp, rhythmic, and melodic, avoiding the temptation to overplay. He serves the groove, cutting through the mix with a biting tone that is articulate and precise. Then the music deconstructs. We enter the seagull section. This is the heart of darkness. The band stops playing music and starts sculpting noise. Crucially, this sound is not a synthesizer. It was created by David Gilmour accidentally plugging his wah-wah pedal in reverse, output to input. This creates a feedback loop that transforms the pedal into a tone generator, controlled by the volume knob on the guitar and the sweep of the pedal. The result is a screaming, banshee-like wail. Coupled with the eerie wind sounds generated by the bass and cymbals, this section simulates a descent into the void. It is terrifying. It is the sound of isolation. For a rock band to put minutes of abrasive, atonal noise in the middle of a commercial record was commercial suicide, yet they did it because the composition demanded it. It serves a narrative purpose. It is the death of the ego, the dissolution of the self before the rebirth. The return from this abyss is the most triumphant moment in the Pink Floyd canon. The shepherd tone effect, an auditory illusion of a tone that continually ascends in pitch, builds a sense of unbearable anticipation. The drums slowly fade back in, not with a fill, but with a pulse. The guitar reintroduces the triplet theme. The crescendo is physical. You can feel the air pressure changing in the room. When the main riff returns, it is cathartic. It is the musical equivalent of breaking the surface of the water after nearly drowning. The lyrical resolution, and everything under the sun is in tune, but the sun is eclipsed by the moon, is not just poetry. It is a prophecy of the album that would follow. The outro of Echoes utilizes a shepherd risé glissando, creating a spiraling, never-ending ascent that fades into the ether. It leaves the listener suspended. It doesn't end. It evaporates. MEDDLE is a masterpiece because it is the sound of a band learning to use the studio as a compositional tool. It is the bridge between the erratic brilliance of the Barrett era and the polished perfection of Dark Side of the Moon. Without MEDDLE, there is no Dark Side. It represents the hard work, the experimentation, and the refusal to compromise. It is analog warmth in a digital world. It is the sound of wood, wire, electricity, and magnetic tape being pushed to their absolute physical limits. It is a reminder that great music is not about the destination or the hook, but the journey and the texture. It remains a monolithic achievement because it dares to take its time in a world that is always rushing. It teaches us that the spaces between the notes are just as important as the notes themselves, and that sometimes, to find your sound, you have to be willing to get lost in the noise. To fully grasp the magnitude of what Pink Floyd achieved on MEDDLE, one must also appreciate the technological context of 1971. This was an era before Pro Tools, before digital quantization, and before the undo button. Every decision made on tape was a commitment. The recording process, which took place across AIR Studios, EMI Studios, Abbey Road, and Morgan Studios, was a physical, tactile endeavor. Tape splicing, The act of physically cutting the magnetic tape with a razor blade and taping it back together was how arrangements were finalized. The seamlessness of echoes is a testament not just to musicianship, but to engineering wizardry. The band and their engineers were pushing the limits of 16-track recording, bouncing tracks down to free up space, a process that adds generation loss and noise, but also creates a cohesive glue that binds the mix together. This natural saturation of the tape is what gives metal its warmth. It is organic. The drums sound like drums playing in a room, not samples triggered on a grid. You can hear the air moving. This reality is what makes the album timeless. It sounds like a performance, not a program. Furthermore, the album highlights the often underrated contribution of Nick Mason. In a genre often dominated by flashy, overplaying drummers, Mason's restraint is his superpower. On MEDDLE, he approaches the kit more like an orchestral percussionist than a rock drummer. His use of mallets on toms, his delicate cymbal work, and his ability to play behind the beat create the pocket in which Gilmour and Wright can weave their tapestries. In Echoes, his drumming during the funky buildup is not about speed, it is about feel. He creates a pocket that is deep and swinging. Without Mason's unique slouching feel, the Floyd sound collapses. He is the heartbeat that allows the brain to wander. Similarly, Richard Wright's contributions on this album are the harmonic glue. His Hammond organ work creates a bed of sound that fills the frequency spectrum, while his piano work provides the melodic counterpoints. The ping is his, but so are the subtle jazz voicings in Saint-Tropez, and the atmospheric synthesizer layers that predate the synthesizer boom of the mid-70s. MEDDLE is arguably Wright's finest hour, where his influence is on equal footing with Waters and Gilmour. The artwork of the album also deserves mention as part of the total aesthetic package. The original Hypnosis cover, depicting an ear underwater collecting sound waves, perfectly encapsulates the sonic experience within. It suggests that this is an album about deep listening. It is about submerging oneself. The visual and the auditory are linked, creating a synesthetic experience for the listener. This was the era of the album as an artifact, an object to be held, studied, and cherished. The gatefold sleeve, the weight of the vinyl, the ritual of dropping the needle, all of these elements contribute to the perception of the work as a masterpiece. It was designed to be an immersive experience, not background noise for a commute. Ultimately, MEDDLE stands as a testament to the power of collective improvisation refined into structure. Many of the ideas on the album, particularly Echoes, which started under the working title Nothings, then Son of Nothings, then Return of the Son of Nothings, were born from rigorous jamming sessions where the band would play for hours, searching for a spark. This process requires a level of musical intimacy and trust that is rare. They had to be willing to play badly to play well. They had to wade through hours of nonsense to find the gold. This is the mark of true musicianship, the work ethic. The magic of MEDDLE is not magic at all. It is the result of 4 musicians showing up day after day and working the problem until they solved it. It is the sound of persistence. It is the sound of a band growing up. We must also consider the harmonic maturity displayed throughout the record. The band moves beyond the psychedelic reliance on simple chromatic descents and begins to employ functional harmony in innovative ways. In Echoes, the use of the chromatic-mediant relationships creates a sense of shifting gravity, where the tonal center feels fluid yet grounded. This sophisticated approach to composition allowed them to construct long-form pieces that did not feel repetitive. They understood that to keep a listener engaged for 23 minutes, you must constantly evolve the harmonic landscape. The interplay between the major and minor tonalities acts as a narrative device, signaling the shift from the pastoral to the terrifying and back again. It is a form of musical storytelling that relies not on lyrics, but on the emotional resonance of chords and intervals. Moreover, the production values on MEDDLE set a new standard for high-fidelity rock recordings. The separation of instruments in the stereo field is immaculate. You can hear the distinct character of the microphones used, the acoustic properties of the rooms, and the subtle nuances of the amplifiers. The engineers utilized the studio space itself as an instrument, placing microphones at varying distances to create natural reverb and depth. This attention to detail ensures that the album reveals new secrets with every listen. It is a dense, multi-layered work that rewards the audiophile and the casual listener alike. The clarity of the bass, the shimmer of the cymbals, and the warmth of the vocals are all captured with a fidelity that rivals modern digital recordings, yet possesses a character that digital can never quite replicate. The legacy of MEDDLE is profound. It provided the blueprint for Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, and Animals. It established the Pink Floyd sound, that unique blend of blues-based guitar, jazz-inflected keyboards, plodding rhythms, and philosophical lyrics wrapped in a surreal sonic landscape. Without the confidence gained from the success of Echoes, the band likely would not have attempted the ambitious concept albums that followed. MEDDLE was the proving ground. It was the album where they realized they could do anything. It stands today not just as a historical artifact, but as a vibrant, living piece of art that continues to inspire musicians and listeners. It is a reminder that true innovation comes from the willingness to experiment, to fail, and to persist. It is a masterpiece of the subconscious, a sonic journey into the depths of the human experience, and a definitive statement on the power of rock music to transcend its boundaries. In the pantheon of rock history, Dark Side of the Moon gets the glory, The Wall gets the theatrical accolades, and Wish You Were Here gets the emotional reverence. But MEDDLE is the musician's album. It is the album you turn to when you want to understand how to build a track, how to use a studio, and how to create an atmosphere. It is a masterclass in tone, a Bible of texture, and a monument to the idea that rock music can be high art without being pretentious. It is direct, it is real, and it is undeniably, unequivocally a masterpiece of the highest order. It challenges the listener to stop hearing and start listening. And in a world of noise, that invitation is more valuable than ever.